Merry Meet Annie here with this week's, actually last week's, YouTube Pagan Challenge. It's about this time of year. And it was slotted in it this week with the idea that a lot of us are celebrating Beltane, which I will be celebrating this coming week. I celebrated the True Cross Quarter, so I am gloriously in anticipation of Beltane. And the season, the length of the season of Beltane. I was trying to think, because I try and keep these YouTube Pagan Challenge videos short, because there's so many of them out there. And I like the bursts, the bite of checking in with everyone who's posted regarding the topic. And I wanted to bring what this time of the year feels like to me down to a word. And the word for me is promise. And there are two shadings to the power of that word for me. The first is promises kept. Knowing through the dark times that the summer will return, the light will increase, there will be brightness again. The promise in a sense of reunion with the returning of energies, perhaps not felt since the fall. That's the case often for me. I go into such complete withdrawal in the dark time. It's a beautiful place to be, but there is always the promise, the spark in the night that lures you out of that and back into the bright sun and the promise it holds. Literally, that brightness and all of its aspects will always return without fail, even when it feels that's not so. There is an unspoken promise, a promise of the psyche, that it's not always like this, where we are in a downtime, and a promise of the season. Ostara is not drastically different here from Imbolc. Beltane is. Shadows are changing, even as the sun is brighter and brighter and earlier in the day and longer in the day. The leaves are starting to fill out, and the literal ground that I walk on is shifting and changing. I'm becoming re-familiar with its summertime shadowing. And the animals that are back in my life that have gone away to their summer places have now returned. The fox in our neighborhood has been collecting bunnies and squirrels frantically. It seems she must have a solid den full of kits this year. She's always walking by with something in her mouth. Haven't really seen her since last year, this time. Reminder of the balance of life. She is so healthy and so strong, doing what she must do to ensure the promise of her next generation. Even while we keep our tiny dog, Bogey, who's only 9 pounds, on close leash, knowing that he could be tempting for Mama Fox. It's a poignant reminder of what must be done to keep the promise. It's not about the return, it's also about what we do with the return. Oh, let's see, the cowbirds are back, the finches are back. The noise in the morning has changed drastically. A lot of mating calls going on out there at the moment, but things like the whippoorwill unheard since the fall. The white cranes have returned. The egrets have returned. The blue herons are here year-round, but the gloriously brilliant white feathers amongst the marshlands and along the edge of the bay are back, have returned. Reunion with things we know well. The goose couple that always makes their nest by the fountains in our community are back. And in the next pond over, the same mallard couple, I dare say, have returned. The deer are happy now back in the woods. They aren't scavenging here in the neighborhood for food anymore. There's plenty in abundance out in the woods for them. Looking forward to, any time now, to see the first speckled fawn showing up at the edge of the meadows with Mom. The promise of what returns. What we can depend upon in the bright, shining time of the year. in nature and also in the shifting of the environment we live in. Living in a place that is very seasonal, that has a tourist season. We live along the ocean's edge. The return of the vibrancy and that truly and literally the color and attitude and clothing and the flamboyance of tourists here having a good time changes our entire environment for the next 4 months. When they leave, it's also the first intimation of the quiet season that will return late in September. So the promise is in the turning, the return to, the reunion with, light and increasing light. But the promise is also, the promise made to that. For me at the spiritual level, it's connecting to the energies of the world around me that shift and change. Make it clear, very clear, what the turning in this instance means. Nature makes itself abundantly clear here when it comes to the beautiful days of May. But there's also the promise which connects to my story that I tell of the gods. Beltane, being that glorious time of celebration and sexuality and sensuality and coming together. Celebrating the two together equal a greater sum than the number 2. Something amazingly larger happens. But it's also the poignant moment when in my story, the god knows that by making his promise to the goddess, by stepping out of his secluded, wild time, stepping into community, especially stepping into his relationship with her, he's making a promise to her to be united with her, to be devoted to her, and therefore the wider community, the wider experience of living. The poignancy for him is, he knows it means he's agreed to his death. As the world around me becomes so vibrant with growing, I'm almost forgetting already how dormant things were just a couple of months ago. Nature's making that promise as the god is making that promise to the goddess. I will step forward all my power and strength, virility and vitality, and I will create the world with you. In this moment, it's not about the ending times at the balanced opposite in this circle of life. But there's also, at the same time, a beautiful paradox that it's present. Its presence. The very act of the birthing of the world is the beginning of its relaxation into decline and passing. The promise, what we are promised, and what we make a promise to. That's the power of this time of the year to me. I have a quote here I wanted to share with you. I'm using it in my journal as a kind of a reflection on where I want to be in relationship to the season. I'm not quite ready yet to give over and step away from the blessed silence that's been part of the winter time for me. But I want to face east. I want to face into the sunrise and into the spring, still having a sense of what's behind me, knowing I'm one with that and it goes with me into this turning. I found this online someplace. It's a short poem by Teresa Ann Moore. I don't know that Teresa is actually a poet. It may have been just on a conversation board or something. But the imagery on this one is what I'm taking in to this moment, this turning of the year. She walks as a silhouette with a glowing orange sunset at her back, being free of regret. When I meditate on that, it's in my journal and I return to it in my meditations at night, I see myself as a silhouette. I see myself from behind myself. I am facing the east, literally here, standing at the edge of the ocean, facing east. And behind me, I know there is a bright orange sunset in the west. I can see the orange reflected around me. creating the silhouette of myself standing in that. I have, in a sense, the warmth of the season past at my back. And I'm looking forward. And I'm letting my meditations every day take me to a place where there's less and less of the orange sunset at my back, and there is more and more of the delicate pastel sunrise in front of me. Promises kept, and promises to be made. And the not always easy decision of what promises to make, to what, and to whom, and to live devoted to those promises this time of the year for me. I wish you all mirth and reverence. Mary Part.